My husband's brother kicked us out. Now, I'm homeless with my children and I simply have nowhere to go. Trigger warning, this story is emotional and sad, but there's something we can learn from it. Let's get right into it. I don't think I was ever ready for my husband's death. I mean, no one's ever ready for the death of their spouse, especially not at such a young age. I knew I had to be strong for our little ones, but the hell that came with his loss just broke me down. It's been so difficult to even laugh or smile over the past few months since he's been gone. He took with him our joy and left us with secrets that we were not prepared for. He had so much to tell me still, something he was desperate to tell me the night he did not come home, but I'd been busy with work. I rushed outside the house that morning to take the kids to school and then later to work. He looked so stressed that morning and was tossing and turning all night. I should have forced him to spit it out and tell me why he was having these phone calls that left him so stressed. But the man was proud and did not want to admit that anything was wrong. Until the last moment. That night, I waited for him to come home and his food grew cold. I put it in the microwave so that as soon as he walked through the door, I'd make it warm again. It was raining heavily that night and the weather forecast said the storm was heading our way. I should have told him not to risk the drive home, as the roads were prone to being slippery. It was 11. I was unable to get a hold of him, and there was no cell phone service. I hoped that he had not decided to drive home and had instead gotten a hotel room close by. But I could not help but have this sinking feeling, especially with our kids, Tristan, Hayden, and Chloe, who were 15, 10, and 7, refusing to go to bed until their father came home. All of them had different reasons. Eventually, I had to threaten for them to go to bed, promising that their father was coming home the very next morning. Days later, Tristan would tell me he hated me and call me a liar, because by the time it was 11 p.m., my husband's been dead for hours. It was only very early in the morning when the storm passed and I received the calls. The calls that I saw at the local hospital had called me multiple times. I knew as I dialed them that it was not good news, but I prayed he was just alive. I couldn't lose him yet. The lady I spoke to tried to be reassuring, but she told me that I had to come to the hospital immediately. It had to do with my husband. At least, well, she did not break the news over the phone. The storm had left the road slippery, and a car had lost control behind my husband, crashing into him, and he crashed into another car. 2 people passed away that night, immediately. All 3 of the cars were ruined beyond repair, and there was a man who did not die immediately and was fighting for his life. But an hour after the crash, he succumbed to his injuries. That man was my husband. I broke apart. Nothing made sense to me. I called for whoever was listening up there to bring back my husband, but all I was met with was silence. At 40 years old, he had been in the prime of his career, a doting father and a wonderful husband. He was just taken too soon. With his death came the funeral arrangement, which was when I realized just how lost I was. My family was trying all they could to take care of the children, but everything fell on me. There was no time for me to properly grieve after that first night, not when I did not know where to find his family. He told me over the years that his father passed away, and it was his father's house where we lived together. They had a difficult relationship, him, his father, and brother. And for after that, his father's death, his brother just stopped talking to him. Jack then got rid of everything and anything connected to his father and brother. All I had were a few photographs that I've hidden from him because I knew how upset he would get if he found them. In the middle of the funeral arrangements, I made a public announcement about his death and then tried my hardest to contact anyone who might have been his brother. I waited and I waited until they lowered that Jack to the ground, but no brother appeared. I focused on my children, who were all very aware that their father was no more, and they were reacting in different ways. Chloe, she understood that he was gone, but she did not have much of a reaction. The other 2 just retreated. They were very, very angry at me for lying, saying he would be back the next day. But as time went by, we just had to move on. I missed him every day, though. I could still hear and see him sometimes. I waited for him to come home and still found myself putting that extra plate at the dinner table. It was 2 weeks after the funeral when my husband's brother arrived. He apologized and said he had been out of the country with no cell service. He proved his identity by providing pictures from his youth. There was no denying that he was my husband's brother. I thought he came to pay his last respects and see where his brother was laid to rest. But this very strange man walked around the house as if he owned it and was too friendly with my children for my liking. I did not want them to be attached, for they would be faced with the reminder of their dad even more. I don't know, maybe it was just the grief that was driving me so crazy that I wanted to keep my kids with me at all times. Just thinking of Jack reminded me of unfair and sudden death could be. I was reminded that no one lived forever. About a week into his visit, this man asked for a family meeting because he had things to discuss with me regarding my husband's estate. My husband did not have a lot besides this house and the wrecked car, so why would he be so interested? What made him think that the man who hated him, for reasons I don't know, would have left him something? It was a few days before the meeting to discuss his will, but I decided to go and listen to what he had to say. I just wanted him to leave, regretting that I brought him here in the first place. He was trying too hard to be the man of the house and act if I was incapable of many things, all because I was grieving. So there I sat and listened as he told me that he needed me and the kids out of the house, for it was in his name. I was puzzled as to why he would say that. I was the mother of Jack's kids, of course, the house was mine. David, who was my husband's younger brother, had no right to anything. I told him to go back to whatever hole he came from because I was not going to be told to leave my darn house. But David told me that even though I was married to my husband, the house was not in my name, something he had neglected to include in his will. I was outraged to find what David's doing, and David had the guts to be poking around my husband's will, when even I did not know what was written on there. I asked him how he even saw the will, and he told me he had connections. So, bribery? No, I could not prove it. Ultimately, he was the rightful owner of the house, since he was next in line to the father's estate. My husband neglect and changing the house to my name gave him the loophole, and there was nothing I could do about it. Not only that, but David felt like staying in the house, so he wanted me and the children to vacate immediately and find somewhere else to stay. I do not beg anyone, and I was not going to start that day. I knew Jake would not want me to beg the scum that was his brother. I started packing mine and my children's things while they were at school. I told him that what he's done to us was going to come back to him one day. And he told me he did not need to see me and my brats anymore. His wife and kids were moving in, but he thanked me for informing him of Jake's death. I know, I was stupid to even look for him and hope that he cared about his brother. But Jack has never told me what happened between them. To this day, I don't know what was so terrible that they've not spoken in years. If I was in David's position, then I would have wanted to know if my brother was no longer alive. I was so heartbroken to leave behind all the memories in that house. The home that belonged to our kids, not some stranger who's been in town for 2 minutes. As I was packing, I saw my husband's briefcase, which contained all his documents. I did not understand most of them, and they were probably just going to add to the clutter. But I needed to strip that house of anything that was his. I could not get an apartment at the time, and cash was low, so I put everything in storage and then rented a motel for the 3 of us. My sons were furious when they heard what David's done. They were also heartbroken, because they've been starting to like him. What mother was I that I could not protect her son's heart, though? I knew they tried to be nice to me, but I was so defeated by how much I failed. I could not even hold on to their father's house. My parents wanted me to join them in their city, but I just could not. Their house was far too small for the all of us, and my kids would have to start a new school. I didn't want to turn their world upside down, so instead, I focused on rebuilding our lives step by step. The first thing that I needed to do was sort out the insurance claim. It took a few days, but everything was cleared and the settlement was on its way to us. It was a generous amount, enough to buy a decent house, but now I was thinking of setting up something for when my kids grow up, especially when I remembered that I could just as easily be taken away from them. I managed to get us a temporary apartment that had so much more space than that motel. As we were putting everything in place, my middle child, Hayden, called me and asked me how to read a word. Then he said utter gibberish. He was holding an envelope. It had the word confidential along with my husband's name. I figured it must have been a work document, so I just opened it out of curiosity. Maybe his workplace would want whatever it was. But what I read on those papers, it was pure horror. Well, not for me anymore because I did not live there. I knew right then that this was what my husband had been trying to tell me all along. That our house was a health hazard and we needed to fix it, but it would cost a fortune. Money that we did not have at the time. I quickly read through the problems and realized just how stupid I have been to disregard some of the problems with the house. The sagging, cracks, and flooding that we had just fixed with some do-it-yourself work. No wonder that man was stressed. It would cost a lot to fix and we would not be home for a couple days. I wondered if David knew it and the danger that he was in. Maybe I could use that to my advantage to get the house back from right under his nose. I made an anonymous call to the city council pretending to be a concerned neighbor who was reporting that the house next door was unstable and that the owner did not seem to be making any plans to fix it. I had my new friend in real estate keep an eye out, and sure enough, she found out that the city council wanted to purchase the house and demolish it. Or he could spend a lot of money fixing it up. I got my friend to make a slightly higher offer, but nothing close to the value of the house that it's truly worth. I would have tons of money left over after the successful purchase of my house from him. It was a pity that I lost money in the process, but it was worth it to face David as he had, just to hand me the keys to the house. His wife and kids were there, and she did not look pleased to find out that we were the ones who bought the house. The way she reacted to us made me realize that whatever poison he was spewing out must have gotten on her too. Therefore, I was not sorry when I told them to get the hell out of my house. She was being conniving for going behind their backs to get the house back. She said that the house had been very important to her husband, who should have inherited it because he was closer and more loyal to their father. It was the wrong husband to inherit the house, and her husband got nothing since his father was broke. So I guessed right. It was all a matter of proving a point and getting revenge over something that happened years ago. David was so petty. And the worst part was that his wife and kids were also dragged into this mess. I only took comfort in knowing that the kids were still young, too far young to understand what was going on. I would have hated for them to hate me for having them kicked out, but David did not care that I was hurting over his brother's death when he kicked me and my kids out, so why should I care? I did give them a day to get every single thing they owned out of the house, but before the next day, or the demolishers would take it off. That was right. I did have money to fix the house, but I decided that I wanted a fresh start. The appearance of David made me realize that this was a place that probably held so much pain for my husband over the years that he could not just talk about. But I had a plan to honor him and also move on with my life. He will live in my memories forever, but I know that I have to carry on for myself and the kids. I have to be strong enough to fill the gap that he left behind, and it all starts with this house. A house where I will leave an equal share to our kids when my time comes to join him. I may be 35, but the years are flying by. Soon, I'll be 40. And then I'll be 60. At that moment, we're living in an apartment while the house is being rebuilt, in the way that my kids and I want it. I cannot wait till it's done and we can move back in. I hope that he'll forgive me for calling David back. In the end, he did not even care or ask me where my husband's buried. He was just so greedy to get that house back and prove a point. But like I promised him, he would not get away with such cruelty. I'm not as weak as he thought I was. I think it says a lot about this story when OP got the house, won, but decided to demolish it anyways. Remember guys, you're only on this planet for so long, so hug everyone you love, because it could be their last. Let's get into story 2. Am I the a-hole for publicly uninviting my fiance's best friend from the wedding over a joke he made? I'm wondering if I'm overreacting, but we'll see. I'm female 30 and I used to be in the adult industry. Now, I'm not proud of myself for what I did, but I don't go hard on myself either, because circumstances were impossible at the time, and I did what I had to do to support my family and myself. My fiancé, who's 33, is completely aware of every single aspect of my past, and he doesn't judge me at all for it. His best friend, however, tends to throw in some backhanded remarks about my past, and he'll just say he's joking. He's prone to making jokes about people's personal life. Apparently, everybody's just okay with it. They call it good sport. Well, last night, my fiancé took me to dinner with his family and his best friend was there. We had dinner and started talking about the wedding, which will take place next month. My fiancé said something about the budget being tight, and his friend said, "Oh, not so sure about this whole wedding thing, since you might find yourself paying for her later on, despite having the legal rights to her now." I was blown away, truly blown away by what he said. I really wanted to let it go, but since my in-laws laughed, then I blew up and called him an idiot. He said, "Oh, relax, it was a joke. Didn't you get it? Well, it's your problem then." My fiancé tried to get me to calm down after I stood up and got more mad and told his friend publicly that he was uninvited from the wedding, then took my stuff and went home. My fiancé came back and he was flipping out at me, saying it's just a joke and I had no right to uninvite his best friend. I pointed out how his friend's jokes was not even funny, but he said that I should quit being oversensitive and taking stuff too personally and serious. We argued and he said it's his wedding too and that I was being controlled and moody. I broke down crying, and he accused me of using tears as manipulation to get the upper hand. I just packed my stuff up and went to stay with my mom. My future mother-in-law tried calling me to tell me about how I'm trying to drive a wedge between her son and his friend by uninviting him from the wedding. I refused to speak to her on that, but my fiancé and her are clearly upset and think I overreacted. Okay, so I ran across a pretty good comment, so let's read it. Not the a-hole. You need to seriously consider whether you want to marry someone who thinks your feelings are less important than his friend's obnoxious jokes. And also, that he considers such a person his best friend. Then, when you tell him you're upset, he accuses you of being controlling because you're upset. This is not healthy behavior and it does not bode well for marriage. What do you guys think about that? Do you agree or no? Let me know in the comment section down below. And I want to say thank you so much for tuning into this video. I hope each and every one of you have a wonderful day. Consider subscribing and I hope to see you back again. I'll see you guys later.